Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 15 of The Bible Yogi. I'm your host, Douglas Roberts. Today we'll be continuing the story of Joseph from Genesis chapter 37. I hope you like the new papyrus font. I enjoy it. Got two things to show you before we get back to our story. Number one, this Bible. And I was looking for Christmas cards this past weekend. And I found two more Bibles in the house in the Christmas card box. This first one is from my wife's, but they're both from my wife's side of the family. This one is from her great-great-grandfather's sister. And she was born, I think, in like 1870. And this is her Bible. And then this Bible is from 1890 also, or 1894. Can't remember. And it's the Bible of the mother of the second wife of her grandfather. Her grandmother had died earlier, and the grandfather went on to marry another woman, and that was her mother's Bible. So if you've been following along and paying attention, my whole premise of the story of Joseph is that it is a messianic type story. And you probably said, hey, Bible Yogi, you missed a few things here that are pretty important. And you're right, I did. I missed a couple of things that I don't know why, but I did. So let's go and review those. First was the fact that Joseph got tossed into a pit. Now, this should be obvious, but this is, remember that the brothers told Israel that Joseph was dead, and they threw him into a pit. This is a foreshadowing. This is a type of Jesus's death and resurrection. If you recall, well, we haven't gotten to the point yet, but we know that Joseph is not dead. And spoiler, eventually it is revealed that he is not dead to his father. And as far as his father is concerned, it is as though Joseph has been resurrected. And this makes sense. I've already discussed the dreams that Joseph had, where he had the dreams where the sun and the moon and the stars were all going to bow down to him. So, of course, he did not die. He just got thrown into a pit. And it came to pass, when Joseph was come unto his brethren, that they stripped Joseph out of his coat of many colors that was on him. And now this is interesting. Jesus also had, or in the Gospels, they also made mention of a coat that he wore. And they crucified him and parted his garments, casting lots, that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken by the prophet. They parted my garments among them, and upon my vesture did they cast lots. This is in Matthew 27:35, and it references Psalm 22:18. I encourage you all to go read Psalm 22. When Jesus was on the cross, he said, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? And that is the first verse of Psalm 22. So Jesus literally was telling everyone, this, me getting crucified, is foretold in Psalm 22. Go read it. And in that chapter, it says, they parted my garments among them, and upon my vesture did they cast lots. And lo and behold, the soldiers did exactly that. And in Genesis 37:24, now we'll talk about the pit. And they took him and they cast him into a pit, and the pit was empty. There was no water in it. And now, when Jesus died, he basically descended into the netherworld, otherwise known as the pit. We know that it was actually Abraham's bosom into which he descended. But some Bible scholars believe that other things were going on, and they base that on these two scriptures that I will now read for us. Ephesians 4:9-10. Now that he ascended, what is it but that he also descended first into the lower parts of the earth? He that descended is the same also that ascended up far above all heavens, that he might fill all things. They're talking about Jesus. And in 1 Peter chapter 3, verses 18 and 19 says, "For Christ also hath once suffered for sins, the just for the unjust, that he might bring us to God, being put to death in the flesh, but quickened," made alive, "by the Spirit, by which also he went and preached unto the spirits in prison," in the netherworld. So there's that, the type of being in the pit. Now also, the coat was covered in blood. So back in Genesis, and we're talking about Joseph and his coat of many colors that his dad Israel gave to him. And they took Joseph's coat, his brothers, and killed a kid of the goats and dipped the coat in blood. And in Matthew, let me see here. Verse 27, chapter 27, verse 28, right in the middle here. "And they stripped him and put on him a scarlet robe." In Mark, it is called, in chapter 15, verse 17, it says, "And the soldiers, they clothed him in purple." So whatever the case, they put a colorful robe on Jesus, and that colorful robe is mentioned, and it is therefore also a type. It is following the type of the special robe that was given to Joseph. But now let's talk about whether or not that coat was soaked in blood. Matthew chapter 22, verse 44. We are now in the Garden of Gethsemane. Jesus has just finished the Last Supper, which was the feast of the Passover, Last Supper. And he's in the Garden of Gethsemane. And being in agony, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat was as it were great drops of blood falling down to the ground. And this is an indication that he was in severe agony, so much so that he is sweating blood. Later on in the Bible, it talks about, in Hebrews, in the book of Hebrews, it says, "You have not yet resisted sin to the point of shedding blood." And Paul was referring to the Garden of Gethsemane, where Jesus, he did not want to go to the cross. He was made of flesh just like you and me. And no one in their right mind is saying, I want to get nailed to a cross and die. No, Jesus didn't want to do that either, which is why he was praying. He was praying that he would not faint, that he would not fulfill the prophecy. And that's a fascinating chapter. We're going to cover that in detail later. In fact, probably I'm going to cover the book of Matthew after I'm done with Genesis. So there you go. Then they released Pontius Pilate Barabbas unto them, and when he had scourged, he had whipped Jesus, he delivered him to be crucified. Then the soldiers of the governor took Jesus into the common hall, and gathered unto him the whole band of soldiers, and they stripped him and put on him the scarlet robe, another colorful robe. And when they had plaited a crown of thorns, they put it upon his head, crunch. And I'm sure if you jam a crown of thorns in someone's head, it's going to cause them to bleed. So now the second way he's bleeding. And they put it on his head and a reed in his right hand. They bowed the knee before him and mocked him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews!" And they spit upon him and took the reed and smote him on the head. And after they had mocked him, they took the robe off him and put on his own raiment back on him, and they led him away to be crucified. And they crucified him and parted his garments, casting lots, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken of by the prophet. They parted my garments among them, and upon my vesture did they cast lots. So there's a lot to unpack here, but the point is the man was whipped. Jesus was whipped. He was clearly bleeding, and then they put his clothes back on him. And then later, when they were going to crucify him, they stripped him, and it says, upon my vesture. A vesture is a nice coat, basically. So they cast lots for it because it was woven of one piece, and it was actually a pretty nice garment, just like the coat of many colors was a nice garment. And in Mark, interestingly, they say, and they clothed him with purple, and purple is mentioned in the footnotes of my study Bible, that it's actually a word meaning any color from the hue of rose to light purple. So it was a very pretty color, we can imagine. And then they took the purple off of him and put his own clothes back on him and led him out to crucify him. So those are some more prophetic types that were mentioned in the book of Genesis that were of the life of Joseph, that were mirrored later on, or foreshadowed in the life of Christ. And I made a remark about the obligatory camels, meaning that when Joseph was sold into slavery, it was because the Midianites came by with their herd of camels bearing spicery and balm and myrrh. And I knew that I'd seen that before, and I knew that it was the parable, it was not the parable, the story of the wise men around Bethlehem and the birth of Christ. And so we read that, and lo and behold, in my study Bible, if you remember my favorite Good News Bible, which has, nice pictures of camels or whatever else the artist in here decides to put, he put camels with the wise men. He put them on camels. So there you go again. So basically, that's more of a what do you call that? Traditional way of showing the three wise men. But how else are you going to cross the desert? You're going to be on camels. So now, another messianic type. Joseph gets thrown into prison. He gets arrested. Not only is he been, allegedly murdered, thrown into the pit. Now he gets thrown into prison. And as we know...
I'm not quite sure how to help you with that.
Thanks, Alexa. But as we know, Jesus was taken as a prisoner to the caliphate, the high priest, and also to Pontius Pilate, the governor. So let's just read the story of Joseph and how he got into trouble. And it came to pass after these things that his master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph, and she said, Lie with me. But he refused, and said unto his master's wife, Behold, my master wotteth not what is with me in the house, and he hath committed all that he hath to my hand. What is that word, wotteth? Well, glad you asked. That is the present tense of the verb wit, meaning to think. And so what this scripture says, behold, my master wotteth not, he's saying he doesn't consider it. He doesn't worry about what is with me in the house. In other words, he hath committed all that he hath to my hand. So in other words, Joseph is saying, he trusts me 1,000%, ma'am. There is none greater in this house than I, neither hath he kept back anything from me but thee, because thou art his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? And it came to pass as she spoke to Joseph day by day, that he hearkened not unto her, to lie by her, or to be with her. And it came to pass about this time that Joseph went into the house to do his business, and there was none of the men in the house there within. And she caught him by his garment, saying, Lie with me. And he left his garment in her hand and fled, and got him out. And it came to pass, when she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and was fled forth, that she called unto the men of her house and spake unto them, saying, See, he hath brought into, he, meaning Potiphar, hath brought in an Hebrew unto us to mock us. He came in unto me to lie with me, and I cried with a loud voice. And it came to pass, when he heard that I lifted up my voice and cried, that he left his garment with me and fled and got him out. And she laid up his garment by her until his Lord came home. Not only does she want to commit adultery, she's also going to lie and get this guy in trouble. She's not a good person. And she spoke unto him, Potiphar, according to these words, saying, The Hebrew servant, which thou hast brought unto us, came in unto me to mock me. And it came to pass, as I lifted up my voice and cried, that he left his garment with me and fled out. And it came to pass, when his master heard the words of his wife, that she spake unto him, saying, After this manner did thy servant to me, that his wrath was kindled. And Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, a place where the king's prisoners were bound, and he was there in the prison. So as we know, Jesus was hauled off to the governor, and he was held as a prisoner. And in fact, on the day of the Passover feast, it was tradition that a prisoner got released to the crowd. My cat was going crazy. Sorry, I had to stop. Where were we? Oh, yes. Jesus was a prisoner. He was, they released a prisoner at the time of Passover, but not Jesus. It was Barabbas. Now, Genesis 39, verses 21 through 23, Joseph prospers in the prison. But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him mercy and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners that were in the prison, and whatsoever they did there, he was the doer of it. The keeper of the prison looked not to anything that was under his hand, because the Lord was with him, and that which he did, the Lord made it to prosper. It's a familiar theme, right? Everywhere Joseph goes, Potiphar and now the warden of the prison, they both recognize that God is with this guy. He's an honest man, and you can put everything in his charge, and everything's going to turn out okay. Okay. Genesis 40, chapter 40, verses 1 through 15, the butler's dream. And it came to pass after these things that the butler of the king of Egypt and his baker had offended their lord, the king of Egypt. And Pharaoh was wroth, angry, against two of his officers, against the chief of the butlers and against the chief of the bakers. And he put them in ward in the house of the captain of the guard, into the prison the place where Joseph was bound. And the captain of the guard charged Joseph with them, and he served them, and they continued a season in ward. So you figure about, 3 months or so? They've been in jail. And they dreamed a dream, both of them, each man his dream in one night, each man according to the interpretation of his dream, the butler and the baker of the king of Egypt, which were bound in the prison. Again, notice how the Bible repeats itself. It doesn't want any ambiguity going on. And Joseph came in unto them in the morning, and looked upon them, and behold, they were sad. And he asked Pharaoh's officers that were with him in the ward of his lord's house, saying, Wherefore look ye so sadly today? And they said unto him, We have dreamed a dream, and there is no interpreter of it. And Joseph said unto them, Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me them, I pray you. I just find this really interesting, that Joseph would say that. It really shows that he's really tight with God for him to say that, and then come up with the interpretation as we see. And the chief butler told his dream to Joseph, and said to him, In my dream, behold, a vine was before me, and in the vine were 3 branches, and it was as though it budded, and her blossom shot forth, and the clusters thereof brought forth ripe grapes. And Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes, and pressed them into Pharaoh's cup, and I gave the cup into Pharaoh's hand. And Joseph said unto him, This is the interpretation of it. The 3 branches are 3 days. Now, you should stop yourself. And before we read the interpretation, ask yourself, how would you have interpreted that dream? I know I was way off. So what does Joseph say it really is? And this is the interpretation. The 3 branches are 3 days. Yet within 3 days shall Pharaoh lift up thine head and restore thee unto thy place, and thou shalt deliver Pharaoh's cup into his hand after the former manner when thou wast his butler. And then Joseph says, But think on me when it shall be well with thee, and show kindness, I pray thee, unto me, and make mention of me unto Pharaoh, and bring me out of this prison. For indeed I was stolen away out of the land of the Hebrews. Remember, his brothers sold him to the Midianites for silver. And here also I have done nothing that they should put me into the dungeon. In other words, Potiphar's wife, she lied, and here I am. So the baker's dream. Let's play the same game again. Try to see if you can figure out what's going to happen to the baker. When the chief baker saw that the interpretation was good, he said unto Joseph, I also was in my dream, and behold, I had 3 white baskets on my head. Maybe those are 3 days, perhaps, eh? And in the uppermost basket there was all manner of bake meats for Pharaoh, and the birds did eat them out of the basket upon my head. Sounds like it could be okay. And Joseph answered and said, This is the interpretation thereof. The 3 baskets are 3 days. I got that part right. Yet within 3 days shall Pharaoh lift up thy head from off thee, and shall hang thee on a tree, and the birds shall eat thy flesh from off of thee. I got that part wrong. How'd you guys do? Notice how Joseph, he doesn't sugarcoat anything, that's for sure. And it came to pass the 3rd day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, that he made a feast unto all his servants, and he lifted up the head of the chief butler and of the chief baker among his servants. And he restored the chief butler unto his butlership again, and he gave the cup into Pharaoh's hand. But he hanged the chief baker as Joseph had interpreted to them. Yet did not the chief butler remember Joseph, but forgot him. And that's where we'll leave it, and we'll pick it up next time when Pharaoh has a dream. Until then, until next time, everybody, please take care.